Before this video starts, I'd just like to make an announcement. I have the Liberal Tears mug for $14.99 on my website. It is the first link in the description if you want to go pick one up. Don't worry if it breaks when it comes to your house. I'll send you another one for free out of my pocket. I don't care. I want you to get your Liberal Tear mug. It comes in Liberal Tears white with the face, black with the face, white without the face, and black without the face. So pick whichever one you want, and it'll come to your door in about 3 to 5 days. So that should be epic. First link in the description. Thank you. Let's go on with the video.
So tonight you have presented the Republican Party as advocating on behalf of individual liberties, even if that means deregulation so that there could be a smaller government and essentially people can have more freedoms, personal freedoms. Despite the fact that that might undermine the Clean Water Act and lead companies to pollute the waters with toxic waste with no repercussions. However, my question to you is, how can you explain the deregulation that the Republican Party supports for smaller government and simultaneously the hundreds, if not thousands, of bills passed by Republican officials since 2011 that have policed the woman's body and limited female access to contraceptives and to abortion?
All right. Somewhat like the mosquito in the nudist colony, I'm trying to figure out where to begin. Well, all right. So, I'll say a very quick word about abortion, a very quick word about deregulation. Abortion first. We talk about birth control and abortion. Let's set aside for one moment the debate about whether or not abortion is a constitutional right. I would submit that it is not. You can read the Constitution, squeeze lemon juice on it, hold it upside down, it's just not in there. But let's assume it was. Let's assume it was sort of invisibly there as part of the Bill of Rights. Right up there with free speech and right up there with the right to religion and the right to assembly and so on. Here's my question to you. Why should the abortion right be subsidized when none of our other fundamental rights are? I mean, you have a right to free speech. Does the government give you money to start a newspaper? You have a Second Amendment right to own a gun. Is the government going to buy you a shotgun? You have a right to free assembly. You got to do it on your own time. You have a right to free exercise of religion. The government's not going to pay for your churches. So, since the government pays for none of our other fundamental rights, why does this right get to be in a category of itself? That's my point number one. Pivoting to point number two. No corporation that pollutes the water should be allowed to do that because that is an actual infringement upon the common good. In other words, that is actually doing harm to the public. This is completely different from the real point of deregulation. The real point of deregulation is to create a scope in which individuals can transact freely. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean. We have a right to health care, and presumably we have an equivalent right to food, right? To eat. What could be more basic than the right to food? Now, let's assume that the government establishes not Obamacare, because that's health care, but an Obama right to food. And the basic idea here is that when you go to the grocery store, you can get food, and somebody else will pay. So you walk into the grocery store, you fill up your cart. I would submit, first of all, that you will excessively fill up your cart because you're not paying. And you're going to show up at the counter, at which point the woman behind the counter will notice that not only have you excessively filled up your cart, but since you're not paying, you don't care what the prices are. And so suddenly milk will start costing $45 because some third guy is actually going to be footing the bill. Now, I would submit that this is in a nutshell what's wrong with our healthcare system. That whenever you go to the doctor, the reason that it costs $3,000 when you have a cold is not because it actually costs $3,000. If you were paying, they'd bill you $75. But since you're not paying, and the insurance company is paying, and the government is paying them, the doctor realizes, I'm going to run 45 tests, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, it's all going to be money in my pocket, it's going to be money for the hospital, and this poor dude isn't the worse off. So most of the time when we go to the doctor, we don't even ask what it's going to cost, because we don't care, because some third guy is paying. So the argument for deregulation is to try to create a healthcare system where people do have healthcare protections, but in which costs are kept down because the guy who's receiving the service is actually paying for it. Let me just throw out a wild idea. If the government were to say to you, everybody in this country has catastrophic health insurance from now on. In other words, if you have a heart attack, you have some catastrophic illness, it's covered. But for routine health care, right, everyone who is under a certain income bracket, we're going to give you a $5,000 check, right? You're free to spend that money on health care, and if you don't use it, you can keep what you don't spend. I assure you that this will send a shockwave through the whole healthcare system. It changes the whole set of incentives, because suddenly the money is your money. No third guy is paying. Now remember, you're covered for catastrophic, which is actually quite inexpensive because catastrophic events are rare. What actually drives our healthcare costs up is routine healthcare. And that's why Obamacare is so expensive, is it covers routine healthcare, which people should pay for. All right.
All right, is this on? Sounds like it. Man, I almost wish that they would introduce me. Hi, I'm Matt Shoup, and I'm obviously the most known person on the stage. Just kidding. None of you know who I am, so give me a second to introduce myself. I'm Matt Shoup. I'm the managing partner of Praetorian Public Relations, a political consultant. I run campaigns for a living. I'm also the executive director of the California Young Republicans Federated. I'm thrilled to have Ben Shapiro here. At 17, Ben was the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in America as part of the Creator Syndicate. Earlier in his career, he was the editor-at-large for Breitbart.com. He co-founded, or is the co-founder of Truth Revolt, the media watchdog site, wrote several successful books, and started his own law practice. Today, he's the editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com, and is the host of The Ben Shapiro Show, the #1 conservative podcast on iTunes. So let's get started. So,
first of all, thank you all for your patience. I apologize on behalf of the airlines. Yeah, really. I wrote a piece this morning defending the airlines, and boy, do I feel terrible about that.
So today, there was a press conference regarding a lawsuit that was filed against UC Berkeley for suppressing the First Amendment rights of the Berkeley College Republicans and the Young Americans Foundation. This seems systemic almost in our culture now, where the left feels that they can aggressively and now violently suppress conservative speech on campus. So, how do we fight it?
Well, I mean, I think that the way Ann is doing it is about the right way to do it. I mean, I did this also at Cal State Los Angeles. We had a similar situation where the administration tried to cancel a speech that I was giving at Cal State LA, and we told them to screw themselves, we were coming anyway. And then about an hour before that speech, they reversed themselves and they allowed me to speak, but it was a near riot. We ended up suing the university. So, this has become relatively systemic. I won't say that it's true for all these colleges. I speak at 25 to 30 of them a year, but I'd say like 3 or 4 a year are really bad, obviously, I do wonder how much at Berkeley is the students and how much is Antifa. Yeah. Because I spoke at Berkeley like 2 years ago and it was no problem, and now Antifa is there making trouble, and it really is disgusting that the administration isn't working with the police to shut down Antifa. I mean, this is a violent group that is obviously violating the rights of people to hear free speech, and that's just, you can't have a rioter's veto this way. It's really awful.
You know, one thing I actually found kind of interesting about it is that they're in violation of the Klan Act, which was developed to fight the KKK, and now the anti-fascist racists are the ones violating it. And so what are your thoughts on kind of the transition of now they call themselves anti-fascist, but a lot of us think that they're actually the fascists?
Well, I mean, so the bottom line to me is whoever brings the gun to the party is the fascist. And these are the people who are bringing the club or the gun. So, but they have a generalized view of the world, which is that everybody who is conservative is a Nazi, and Nazis ought to be punched. So if you use that two-step logic, then everybody who is right-wing ought to be punched. There are two flaws to that. One, you shouldn't punch Nazis unless Nazis are physically threatening you. And two, not all right-wingers are Nazis, but they don't seem to see the connect.
So there's been obviously an escalation in willingness to do violence by these groups on campus and towards conservatives. How do we fight that escalation?
I mean, unfortunately, what you're seeing is you're starting to see groups that feel the necessity to show up and defend speakers, and I think that that's totally within their purview. I mean, I spoke on my podcast this week with a couple of people who showed up at another one of these free speech events in Berkeley, and one of these fights broke out, and it turned violent. If people aren't willing to stand up and defend their free speech, and the police are just going to stand by and do nothing, I don't see what choice people have other than to defend themselves. And listen, I would love to see a situation... I would love to see a situation where none of this violence breaks out. I didn't used to have to bring bodyguards to my public events. I didn't used to have to bring security when I would speak on college campuses. Now, whenever I speak on a college campus, I have to bring 2 members of security, and we have to coordinate with the police beforehand. This is something that didn't exist 2 years ago, and I fear that it's only getting worse because there's a group of people who cheer this stuff. There's a group of people who feel like they've really done some sort of yeoman's work. Now, the irony of this, of course, is that there are certain people on the right who are provocateurs who are waiting for this, who really want this. Like, I'm happy to go speak to a crowd of people with no violence, just to have the discussion. I mean, I'm perfectly happy destroying people in debate, right? I don't actually have to do it physically. But what you see very often is that there are people on the right who are itching for this. And if the left understood that, they'd be much better off because they're actually feeding into a lot of what is driving the popularity of certain political figures.
So, but where do you see this plateauing at a certain point? Where do you think this is going?
I mean, I do think that there will be a backlash at a certain point. I think that there's going to be liberals as opposed to people on the left, and I always make that distinction, who say enough is enough. I mean, you saw Bernie Sanders, of all people, come out and defend Ann's right to speak in Berkeley. I don't know in what alternative timeline, like, were for some reason in the alternative timeline where Biff married Marty's mom, and everything is explained by this simple divergence in time, but in the time-space continuum. But yes, I mean, now I'm standing with Bernie Sanders and Bill Maher because I think that this has gone so far that even folks on the left are beginning to look and say, this is a little bit crazy. We have to stop this.
So, but, you know, it's one thing when these speakers coming up, Milo and Ann, they swoop through Berkeley and they cause these incidents, but then the Berkeley College Republicans and all these conservative groups are kind of left there to go to class the next day and deal with their peers. How do you suggest to them they deal with this on a day-to-day basis?
You know, I'm not sure that on a day-to-day basis they're really dealing with it that much from their peers. I think that I think that they're the brave ones because you're right. I mean, I come, I speak, I leave, and they have to deal with the fallout. But the truth is, most people on college campuses don't care that much about politics. Like, this is the great lie of media coverage of politics on campus. The vast majority of college students are totally apathetic about this stuff. They want to smoke pot and drink and have sex and be left alone for the most part to babble back to their professors whatever they think their professors want to hear, get the grades and leave. I mean, that's what most college students are there to do. So, you know, this idea that it's all, you know, people beating on each other for politics, I think there's a certain subsection of the campus that cares deeply about it, but I think it's a relatively small subsection. You know, going back to my days at UCLA, I'll say it for the rest of the YAF members, the college Republicans, I enjoyed the fight. I think that most people on the right sort of enjoy this. If you didn't enjoy it, then why do it? But, you know, I think that there are some notes that they should, take, such as don't mouth off to a professor if it means that you're going to sacrifice your grade. I differ from some other people on the right in saying this. I think that it's very foolish for conservatives to give the baton to people on the left who want to use their power to quash conservatives. Instead, get good grades, make lots of money, give donations to the school, and get the professor fired.
So do you see a long-term solution to almost the culture war that you see at university campuses where they, you know, now that, you know, people think that they're indoctrinating these youth to be, you know, you talk a lot about, you know, the trans rights, you know, culture that's going on and stuff. Do you see us fighting that? Do you see us winning it? How does that happen?
Well, I mean, that's sort of a different kind of question than sort of the free speech argument to a certain extent, because that's where you see social liberals in conflict with certain basic concepts of free speech. Like my view on transgenderism is that you can call yourself whatever you want, but the minute that you demand that I call you something, now you are imposing something on me, and that's not the way this works. So this is that is a bigger battle, but I do think that there's going to be sort of a libertarian agreement that arrives on campus where people say, listen, we'll all just leave each other alone, and that'll be it, and we can all go about our lives. I think that's going to happen in America more broadly, too, because I don't think this sort of tension can keep up. I think there will be a sort of conservative libertarian merger on the right, where people on the right acknowledge that libertarians are basically right about government. Government sucks at everything, so let the government get out of it. And libertarians sort of acknowledge about conservatives that conservatives are right that you have to have some sort of social fabric that exists largely because of religious communities and people who are willing to pick each other up so the government doesn't have to do that. And I think that if you have that, then you have the makings for a broad agreement that it's possible for people to get behind on campus. I think it's sort of similar. I think that
hello everyone, hey, I'm just stopping by to remind you that liberals are insane. Social justice warriors are becoming more violent and triggered than ever before. Anyways, be sure to subscribe to KGPPV on YouTube and have a blessed day. Yeah, man.
Tell me what you
I'll say a very quick word about abortion, a very quick word about deregulation. Abortion first. We talk about birth control and abortion. Let's set aside for one moment the debate about whether or not abortion is a constitutional right. I would submit that it is not. You can read the Constitution, squeeze lemon juice on it, hold it upside down, it's just not in there. But let's assume it was. Let's assume it was sort of invisibly there as part of the Bill of Rights. Right up there with free speech and right up there with the right to religion and the right to assembly and so on.
Before this video starts, I'd just like to make an announcement. I have the Liberal Tears mug for $14.99 on my website. It is the first link in the description if you want to go pick one up. Don't worry if it breaks when it comes to your house. I'll send you another one for free out of my pocket. I don't care. I want you to get your Liberal Tear mug. It comes in Liberal Tears white with the face, black with the face, white without the face, and black without the face. So pick whichever one you want, and it'll come to your door in about 3 to 5 days. So that should be epic. First link in the description. Thank you. Let's go on with the video.
So tonight, the hundreds, if not thousands, of bills passed by Republican officials since 2011 that have policed the woman's body and limited female access to contraceptives and to abortion.
All right. Somewhat like the mosquito in the nudist colony, I'm trying to figure out where to begin. Well, all right. So, fine. Here's my question to you. Why should the abortion right be subsidized when none of our other fundamental rights are? I mean, you have a right to free speech. Does the government give you money to start a newspaper? You have a Second Amendment right to own a gun. Is the government going to buy you a shotgun? You have a right to free assembly. You got to do it on your own time. You have a right to free exercise of religion. The government's not going to pay for your churches. So, since the government pays for none of our other fundamental rights, why does this right get to be in a category of itself?
You have presented the Republican Party as advocating on behalf of individual liberties, even if that means deregulation so that there could be a smaller government and essentially people can have more freedoms, personal freedoms. Despite the fact that that might undermine the Clean Water Act and lead companies to pollute the waters with toxic waste with no repercussions. However, my question to you is, how can you explain the deregulation that the Republican Party supports for smaller government and simultaneously